And that physiological shift is literally releasing light from within the strands of your DNA. And that is where we get the term radiance.
Okay.
And that light, when it is unleashed, is a ton of potential energy, a bunch of stored energy that's been sitting in your DNA that up until this point has gone into the defense of the pathway of challenge and digging in on your routines and patterns and habit self and old versions. But what starts to happen with your radiance is all the energy that's being held back by those things gets pushed back down into your DNA and then released as light. Welcome to How to Read Your Activation Sequence Part 3.
Yeah.
We've already gone through terms and life's work and the pathway of challenge and the sphere of your evolution.
Yeah.
And now we're moving on to the pathway of breakthrough.
And radiance.
And then the sphere of radiance. Woo! Was that your light?
That's my radiance.
Inner light coming out?
Yeah.
Okay, so pathway of breakthrough is where I wanted to start. This is a place where we are moving from what is conscious to us in our conscious awareness to what is unconscious to us. Meaning you cannot directly take the frequency of your radiance from the shadow to the gift by focusing on your radiance, because it is subconscious to you. It is not available for you to do that. The way that that happens is by focusing on the two spheres on either end of the pathway of challenge. So your life's work and your evolution. And when you're able to raise your frequency through those spheres and through the energy interacting there, then your frequency at your radiance and your purpose are going to come into the higher frequencies and be more online.
Oh.
That makes sense to you?
That's a breakthrough for me.
Breakthrough, starting the pathway of breakthrough with a breakthrough. I feel like that is a good sign. So the breakthrough comes when we are able to handle that challenge in a way that serves us instead of like engaging in a conflict or letting it make us feel like a victim or whatever. When you are able to use your creativity and see the things that are brought into your life by God, by the universe, as tools for your continued growth and development, then our radiance begins to shine through.
Okay.
So we need to go through that 3-step process that I talked about last time. Allow, accept, embrace from our inner shadows. And when we do that, then what has been hidden in those shadows breaks out, breaks free, and that is what becomes your radiance.
Okay.
So the gene keys are called the gene keys because it's all about your DNA, right? It's about your flavor of awakening, how it shows up for you based on your genetics. And mutation of your DNA, an actual physical mutation, is breakthrough. So I want to remind people that there is very much real physiology that's happening here at the shadow level, at the gift level, and at the city level. It's called the gene keys because, like, yes, is it esoteric and out in woo-woo land sometimes? Absolutely. However, that translates to chemicals, hormones in your body. So when you're in the gift frequency or you're in the city, you're going to have more serotonin flowing through your body. Like, this is very much a physiology that comes with it. And so that's what I mean by the mutation of your DNA is what is leading to a breakthrough. The processes that are happening within your body are changing. And that physiology or physiological shift is literally releasing light from within the strands of your DNA. And that is where we get the term radiance.
Okay.
And that light, when it is unleashed, is a ton of potential energy, a bunch of stored energy that's been sitting in your DNA that up until this point has gone into the defense of the pathway of challenge and digging in on your routines and patterns and habit self and old versions. But what starts to happen with your radiance is all the energy that's being held back by those things gets pushed back down into your DNA and then released as light.
Okay. So radiance is more about that physiological shift that's releasing light, not about how you are presenting to the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Meaning, like I thought radiance was more like what you emit to people.
Your radiance very much has to do with your aura,
Yeah.
and how you're interacting with the world, for sure. But that aura change is driven from this release of light within your DNA.
Okay, so it's both.
And we often, or have talked in the past, about literally our bodies eating light. So for those of you that are familiar with Rick Rubin, the famous music producer, or Andrew Huberman, or another guy named Jack Krause, they were all on a podcast together on Tetragrammaton, it's called, which is Rick Rubin's podcast, which is another word for God, if you didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
And they have a podcast about the physiology, literally, of eating light. And it is Jack's belief that this is going to be a giant missing piece of science that is going to be coming around the corner. So although this is esoteric right now, it might not be in the future.
Yeah.
Okay, so the activation sequence is all about discovering your genius. And it's important to understand that genius is not a skill or a thing that you outwardly do in the world, but it is a flavor or a quality of consciousness. And it is that flavor of consciousness and how it interacts with other people that makes you seem like a genius to them. So your radiance and your purpose are being as opposed to doing. And that being, the way that you show up to the world, is how people feel your radiance.
Okay.
For some people, your radiance comes through as a rush. Like there's just this aha moment. And actually the key that's in your radiance lends me to think that that is going to be the case for you.
Oh boy.
For other people, and I'll tell you why here later when we get to that actual key. For other people, it is more of a trickle. It's like a slow process of finding this radiance over time.
Is that you?
I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I would say for my key, it probably, I don't know. My key could go either way. The last thing that I wanted to talk about here with the pathway of breakthrough is the fact that there is breakthrough happening at 3 levels. So there's mental breakthrough, meaning that we are able to think differently. We see the patterns of thinking, and that allows us to change those patterns of thinking. Then we have emotional breakthrough, which is like this different, basically seeing the world through the eyes of love and believing that people aren't out to harm you. And then we have physical breakthrough, and that's ultimately what this is about. And that is the breaking free of this light within your DNA.
Okay. Did those 3 things happen sequentially like that?
Typically, yes. Okay. Yeah, normally you're going to start on the outside and work its way in deeper. And then ultimately, this breakthrough slides into the higher bodies, which are the causal body, the Buddhic body, and the Atmic body. But we're going to save that for another time. Okay, now on to the sphere of radiance. Do you have anything actually with breakthrough?
No.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the sphere of radiance, I thought it was interesting. I didn't even know we were going to do this podcast today. Courtney texted me a few hours ago and was like, hey, do you want to do this? And I was like, sure, let's do it. But today an email came out. Sorry, if you're not watching, it's a sip of tea that's happening right now.
It's tea time.
A video came out today from the Gene Keys. And it is the official new year now, if you did not know that, as per the Gene Keys and a lot of other traditions as well. So we're passing through the 41st Gene Key in the land of astrology right now, which is actually my pearl, but it is the city of emanation. So the start of things, the divine start of things. But in that email, Richard Rudd addressed the question, what is the most magical gene key? And his answer to that question was, whatever gene key is in the sphere of your radiance. So this is literally where the most magic is, according to the founder of the Gene Keys, in your profile. And what the sphere of radiance is talking about is this inner light. And it's underpinned by spiritual evolution. And spiritual evolution is underpinned by physical evolution. So spiritual evolution is the seed and physical evolution is the fruit. So as we develop spiritually, as we understand new insights and new ways of thinking and seeing and being in the world that are closer to God, the physical expression of our form changes. And that is how Gaia continues to evolve new creatures on this planet. As we get more spiritually involved, we get more physically evolved.
Isn't it interesting, though, that sometimes it's the physical that brings you to the spiritual?
Meaning what?
Meaning a lot of people have physical crises or something like that that pushes them to the spiritual.
Absolutely. That is a different thing. That's like, I think, just getting more in contact with your form and your being, which is like, I think that opens to your eyes to there being something else. Mm-hmm. What I'm talking about here is a transmutation, a mutation of DNA, a release of something new, some sort of new form. So ultimately, in the mystical teachings of the Gene Keys, there's going to be a being that has a triple helix instead of a double helix.
Yeah.
And when we get to that triple helix, that's when we can literally be beings of light.
So you mean it's like a movement towards a physical evolution?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So spiritual evolution occurs as people break through and that light is released from their DNA. So we have this radiance, that light is released, that gives way to spiritual evolution, which then gives way to physical evolution, and onward we march on the journey of this planet.
So is your radiance your flavor of spiritual evolution? Your specific radiance?
I would say your radiance is more the way that your spirituality engages with other people's spirituality.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So it's like unspoken.
Very much. Yeah, it's all subconscious communication. It's communication through your aura. Mm-hmm. So your radiance dictates your health, it dictates your vitality, and it dictates your aura. Those are the three big pieces. And your aura is just electromagnetic. It's an electromagnetic afterglow of our inner essence, of what's going on inside of us. And it's sensed by our intuition very easily.
Yeah.
So like if you go into a room with people, there might be one person in there that you feel an immediate connection to, like they just feel good to you, you feel safe, you feel like you can talk to them. And then somebody else, and it could literally be the identical twin of this person. Mm-hmm. So they might look exactly the same, be wearing the same clothes. So it's not that's turning you off. But this other person, you just are like, I don't want to be around you. I don't feel safe here. I want nothing to do with you. And that's because that person's aura is reacting with your aura in a certain way.
Yeah, I think most people have had an experience with that.
100%. So when we are in the shadow of our radiance, we are out of kilter with the world's or the universe's natural rhythms, which makes us worried all the time. It makes us hurried all the time. It makes life time-centric, meaning that there's just this unconscious mistrust in the flow of life. Like I'm always late, I'm always running to catch up, I've always got too much on my plate.
Yeah.
That's the shadow of your radiance.
Yeah.
When we get into the gift, there is this just natural tendency to slow down, mm-hmm. to contemplate more, not to think more. That's important because contemplation isn't up here. It starts up here, but then ultimately it gets all the way down into our body. And that's what I'm talking mm-hmm. about. It's this more time of not thinking, honestly, mm-hmm. even though I'm calling it contemplation. And your radiance emerges as a pulsing of light through your aura. So again, this is all your aura is what is happening here. It's why you can walk into a room with somebody like a Ram Dass or an Osho or any of these spiritual teachers, and people talk about this just intense feeling that they get when they're around these humans. Mm-hmm. And that's because they're in the city of their radiance.
Yeah.
So a couple things happen. Number one, when our radiance moves into the gift, number one, we're going to be more healthy on the outside. meaning like the physical systems of our body. You might lose weight, you might eat better, you might have a stronger liver, you might like whatever, but your body, your physical body is going to feel better. And that's because the outer always reflects the inner.
And I think a lot of times we don't realize this, but a lot of people, their skin and their face looks better, and people say you're radiating.
Yeah, you're glowing.
Quite literally what's happening.
Absolutely, yeah. Also, what happens along with that, because the outer reflects the inner, is that your natural sort of habits that you didn't love beforehand, the stuff that you used to fall back to, whether that's drinking or smoking or whatever it is for you, those start to fall away naturally. They begin to realign more with your higher being because your radiance is starting to come online. Also, you're going to be happier. Not for an external reason, but again, because your endocrine system is producing hormones that feel better to you. Mm-hmm. The second thing that happens when we get into the gift of our radiance is synchronicities start to happen all around you because you are aligned with the universal flow. You're in trust. And when you are in trust, things just start to happen naturally around you. Mm-hmm. And then finally, we have the city of your radiance. And the city of your radiance is signified by a halo, also known as an aureole, I think is how you say that. But a halo, like old school version of what you would see above an angel, that is the illumination of radiance. Mm-hmm. Like all of those things are like I believe that that has happened physically in the world. There has been a light over somebody's head.
Certainly. Where else would it have come from?
Exactly. Exactly. However, we don't see that now, I think, because of the industrial evolution or revolution, excuse me, largely, which is just causing people to live their lives totally different than people used to live their lives 1,000 years ago. It's faster. People aren't taking the time to be with themselves. We're not with nature as much. And so I think that's why we're not seeing that expression very much anymore. Mm-hmm. Okay, last thing before we move into Courtney's specific stuff is the 6 lines of the radiance. So first line is solitude. And what I want you to think about here, these are the things that you need for your radiance to start to shine through. Okay. So first line is radiance. First line is solitude, meaning you need to go within yourself. You need to create time and space for yourself. Because like always, the first line is about stability. It's about going within. It's about taking time, slowing down. The second line, which Courtney and I both are, is marriage. And marriage is not certainly not the institution of marriage. It is not necessarily a relationship with another person. It could be a marriage to a place or a thing or a teaching, but it is an exclusive relationship with something else.
A deep relationship.
Exactly, that helps your radiance to come through. Yeah. Third line is interaction. And what the third line needs is diversity and change. So it's simply about having lots of different experiences. Mm-hmm. And that is what releases the third line radiance. Fourth line is friendship. And this is different from marriage because it's not an exclusive relationship. You need lots of different relationships. It's different from interaction because the third line, interaction, is all about just the experience, whereas the fourth line is more than just that, the energy exchange. It's deeper than that. It's more of a relationship. It's like an ongoing thing. Okay. The fifth line is impact. So fifth lines are magnetic. They're leaders. And that's what they need in order for their radiance to start to shine through. Is they need to influence people. They need to be out in the world sharing their gifts with people.
That's a Tony Robbins.
Exactly. I would bet he's a fifth line. Yeah. And then finally, sixth line is nurture. So what the sixth line needs is patience, always. You need patience. This is a longer path when you're on your sixth line. So take your time.
I'm glad I'm not a sixth line.
Don't hurry anything. I mean, we have lots of sixth lines.
I know, this time we got a break. So before we move on to mine, can I ask a question about the radiance?
Of course.
So having your radiance come through is about working through the challenge of the first 2 spheres, the life's work and the evolution. So can you drop in and out of the gift frequency of radiance? Like if you're starting to get caught up, that brings your radiance offline?
Absolutely.
So I feel like I've absolutely experienced that, where I'm like in a place where everybody's reacting to me differently, and then we start to shift back out of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
And that's largely coming, though, because you've shifted out of the higher frequencies
In the other
of
two.
the other two.
Okay, yeah.
All right, so Courtney's Radiance is the 64th gene key, which is the shadow of confusion, the gift of imagination, and the city of illumination. And she is a second line there, so 64-2. I found it interesting as I looked at this gene key that the very first sentence says that the 64 is about the mystery of inner light.
Do you care to elaborate?
Well, that ties exactly to radiance,
Yeah.
right? Like it's the mystery of inner light, and that's the position that it's in for your profile.
I love this key.
Which is just cool.
Yeah.
I have a lot of those too. Like my EQ is the 6th gene key, which is the gene key that regulates the emotions, right?
Yeah.
And it's in my EQ, which
Yeah.
I think is cool. So what confusion is obscured inner light. It's this light that's in our DNA that cannot get through because it is blocked from something. And that something is this energy that is called the massa confusa, or the elemental chaos, which is just this pure potentiality, what the world, what the universe was made from. The problem is that our mind tries to make sense of that place. And that leads to bewilderment, because it is not meant to be understood. It is meant to be felt. It is meant to be known as a place where things are born from. Mm-hmm. And we try and make sense of the place instead of allowing the thing to come through, which doesn't ever come through in words. I think that's really important, or very rarely comes through in words.
Yeah.
So we try to use our mind to settle the uncertainty that we're feeling in that place. We try to use our minds to avoid feeling suffering. We try and make reasons as to why it's happening, but there is no reason. Yeah. And you're never going to be able to figure it out. And that is where the programming partner comes in here. So it's the 63rd gene key, which is the shadow of doubt. So we can't figure it out, and we start to doubt ourselves. Mm-hmm.
So this is a shadow of intellectualization.
Yes, it's very much of the mind. Mm-hmm. Confusion just needs one thing, which is time. Time is how we solve confusion. It's allowing where we get into trouble is allowing outside forces, or even sometimes inside forces, to pressure us into take early action while we are still confused. Instead of sitting in the confusion until something naturally comes through, we try and rush the process, or we go and search for a teacher. All of this because we don't feel comfortable in the suffering that is this massa confusa. Mm-hmm. Another thing that I think is worth mentioning is the word confusion. Confuse. To be merged with reality. Which, if we are merged with what we see as reality, that means that we are not defined. And if we are not defined, we don't have access to our creativity. We are not original. Confusion comes from transformational forces. So maybe the death of somebody, or somebody comes and robs your house. That is what pushes us into confusion. It's not the event itself, but it's us trying to make sense of that event. Mm-hmm. But in reality, if we can just be with that, if we can just be with the not knowing, which is massive, right? Not knowing is infinite, literally, and it's very overwhelming. But if we can make a choice to just sit in that, then we're able to come out on the other side of transformation. Yeah. On the divine side of transformation. The last thing I'll say with the shadow here is that action out of confusion just leads to more confusion.
Isn't that the truth?
We just need time.
This key and this shadow feels so unbelievably relevant to me right now.
All right, moving on to the gift here, we have imagination. So imagination, the first thing I'll say is that suffering is in our physiology, not in our mind. Meaning, again, that it is a hormonal balance that happens that makes us feel suffering. It's in our body. It's stored as trauma. In our mind, it's illusion. In our mind, it's confusion. But our minds do hold the key to releasing that suffering. And the way that we do that is by honoring the pain that's there, by seeing it, by believing it. And if you don't believe that there's pain there, I dare you to go and be in your version of solitary confinement for 7 days, which I did what I called an input retreat, where nothing came in, no podcasts, no music, no nothing. And you will very, very quickly get in contact with that pain. However, the willingness to feel the pain is what begins the miracle of our imagination. Our mind just tries to stop the pain. But as our spirit agrees to face the truth of who and what we are, the mind begins to see how our avoidance is what is keeping us stuck there in the first place.
Yeah.
And the moment that you stop feeding the mind is the moment that we release all of that energy that has been stuck into our creativity. Imagination is just the expression of unimpeded life force, right? It's about getting out of the way and stop bogging yourself down in the victim state of I am just suffering all the time, and be in that suffering. It is part of being human. And when that happens, then the imagination comes through and we're able to create. And in the beginning of that creation, most people are just going to tell the story of that pain somehow. Right? They're going to write a story about it. They're going to make a poem or a painting or something that describes the pain.
Yeah.
Ultimately, this is where all art comes from, though. So eventually, as we grow, we end up painting the beauty, not just the pain. The gift of imagination is the death of imitation, because imagination is to go where nobody has gone before. Imagination is original. It is our version of taking everything that's happened into us, sitting with it, and then spewing something out from that. And nobody else has your exact life experience. Nobody else has your exact genetics. And so if you are doing that something somebody else is doing, that's not imagination, that's imitation.
Yeah.
Take time, add space, add confusion, and the result is magic. And that is imagination. The 64th shadow has the vision. It can see or have a flash of what it wants to create or make. But the 64th gift actually listens and trusts and acts on those things. That's really the big difference here.
That hits hard.
Me too. Genius takes boldness. And to allow deep change, we need to make sure that we understand that life is not designed to be stable. At the shadow frequency, we just want things to be consistent, to be the same all the time, because we don't trust the void. We don't trust the confusion. But in reality, that is what drives art. It's what drives creativity. It's what drives growth. So we need to trust in our wildest dreams. We need to trust in the spontaneous and the unexpected and the unreasonable.
Yeah. Before we move to the city, did you have anything else to say about that? I wanted to just say the thing that keeps popping into my head, and which has certainly shown up in my life, is this looking like you feel some sort of pain, like maybe somebody wronged you or something like that, and you feel anger towards them. And you, in the shadow, find every reason why they did that, why you reacted the way that you did. Like you've every piece of the puzzle you've thought through in your mind so that you feel like you can move forward. But what's actually happening is you haven't felt it at all, and you haven't lived in the uncertainty of like, it could be something outside of yourself that's causing this pain. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I see a lot of people do that. Like they go to therapy and they talk about every single thing about it, but nobody feels it actually feels the pain and moves forward. It's just talk, 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 do nothing.
Yeah.
And you're sitting in that shadow.
Definitely. Yeah. It's hard to actually just be with it and
really
not
hard.
try and move it or change it or
Understand it.
Yeah. Just got to
Predict
feel
it. Yeah.
It's gnarly. All right. Lastly is the city of illumination, which if you haven't listened to the last couple here, the cities are going to be shorter because they are basically impossible to put into words. But illumination, I love this sentence from the book, imagination without the eye. So there is no more you to imagine anything at the city frequency. You have merged. It's also listening without words. So all masters at their core have the same inner truth. But if you're listening to the words, you are more than likely going to miss the message.
Yeah.
Because the way that the message is transferred to you is actually in the silence between the words. It's in the light that's pouring from them. It's in their aura. And if we get too locked into what they're saying, we're hearing them, but we're not listening to them.
Yeah.
And the chances of you speaking the exact language of whatever master you're listening to are 1 in 64, based on the gene keys. And so the chances are you're not going to be able to connect with a specific language, but you will be able to hear or feel the thing that's underneath it. An example of this is a koan, if you're familiar. So this comes from the Zen tradition. And a koan is something like, what's the sound of one hand clapping, is like the most famous one that's out there. And the idea behind a koan is that it confuses the mind into submission. So it puts you so deep in that confusion that you're like, fuck it. Like, I'm just going to let go. And in that moment of letting go, we get this, it's called a satori in the Eastern traditions, this immediate awakening. And it comes when our mind is finally just submits into the confusion. And then that, in that moment is when we get the illumination. Illumination is the path of Tantra. It's the yin path, the surrender path, contrasted with the 63rd key here, which is all about truth, which is the yang path, which is the doing path, the step-by-step path. This path of illumination cannot be followed with the mind, only with the heart. And when you think in illumination, there is thinking, but they are God's thoughts, not your thoughts. And those thoughts lead to immediate manifestation on this plane. So now we're talking about making things instantly through this city. And that is the 64th city of illumination.
Got it.
All right, we are finished up for today, which is great because I got to go get my child. Next time we're going to go through the pathway of core stability and the sphere of purpose.
Okay.
We'll see you then.